Welcome back to Mint Vault USA, the channel where ordinary-looking coins can hide extraordinary stories and, in some cases, surprising value. Today, we're taking a close look at 4 Lincoln pennies that many people would ignore because they're black, dirty, heavily worn, or covered with corrosion. But don't let those rough surfaces fool you. Some of the most interesting discoveries begin with coins that appear almost worthless at first glance. Stay with me until the end, because one of these pennies has a history that has amazed collectors for decades, and under the right circumstances, examples have sold for incredible amounts of money. Now, let's start with the first coin. This first coin may be one of the biggest surprises in today's countdown. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than an old, dirty penny with dark brown toning and years of circulation. Many people would toss it into a jar without giving it a second thought. But experienced collectors know that appearances can be misleading. Sometimes, a heavily circulated coin with untouched surfaces tells a much more interesting story than a shiny coin that has been cleaned. And in rare situations, the right 1948 Lincoln wheat penny has captured the attention of collectors willing to pay astonishing amounts of money. Before you decide this coin is ordinary, take a much closer look. Let's travel back to 1948. America was entering a new chapter after World War II. Cities were growing, new neighborhoods were appearing across the country, and families were beginning fresh lives after years of uncertainty. Factories that once produced wartime equipment were now making products for everyday Americans. Businesses were busy again, stores were full of customers, and millions of Lincoln wheat pennies passed from one hand to another every single day. They bought bread, gasoline, newspapers, train tickets, and school lunches. No one imagined that decades later these same pennies would become small pieces of American history collected around the world. Among those coins was the 1948 Lincoln wheat penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Because it came from Philadelphia, there is no mint mark beneath the date. That empty space often surprises beginners, but seasoned collectors recognize it immediately. Instead of being a mistake, the missing mint mark simply identifies where the coin was made. It is one of the first details experts check before they begin looking for anything unusual. Hold the coin under bright light and study the front carefully. Abraham Lincoln's portrait still dominates the center even after years of circulation. Across the top, you will find the familiar words, "In God We Trust." To the left sits the word liberty, while the date 1948 appears on the right. Even on a worn example, collectors want these features to remain clear enough to read. Strong lettering often tells them that although the coin circulated for many years, it avoided the extreme damage that destroys important design details. Now flip the coin over. The reverse displays the famous wheat ears that gave the entire series its nickname. One wheat stalk stands on each side, surrounding the words 1 cent. Beneath that is United States of America, while E pluribus unum curves across the top. Every remaining line inside those wheat ears helps tell the story of how much the coin circulated. Even when the finer details become smooth, experienced collectors still examine the reverse carefully because every surviving feature matters. The 1948 wheat penny was made from 95% copper with 5% tin and zinc. It weighs about 3.11 grams, measures just over 19 millimeters across, and has a plain edge. Those specifications remained consistent throughout the wheat penny series during that era. When collectors inspect a coin, they often compare its weight, size, and appearance with known examples to make sure nothing unusual has happened after it left the mint. Now let's focus on something many people misunderstand. This particular coin shows natural toning along with minor environmental wear. The surface has become darker after spending decades in circulation and storage. Maybe it rested inside an old coffee can in someone's garage. Maybe it stayed forgotten inside a wooden drawer, a leather wallet, or a family coin jar for generations. Copper changes over time, and every storage environment leaves its own fingerprint on the surface. Some beginners believe dark color automatically means damage. That simply isn't true. Natural brown or chocolate toning is common on older copper coins. In fact, collectors often appreciate original surfaces that have aged naturally over many decades. They understand that originality cannot be recreated once it disappears. Environmental wear is another feature that deserves careful attention. Small stains, light spotting, or tiny patches of discoloration may result from years of exposure to moisture, changing temperatures, or storage conditions. Minor environmental wear does not automatically destroy collector interest. Instead, collectors try to determine whether the surfaces remain stable or whether active corrosion is continuing to damage the metal. This is exactly where many people make an expensive mistake. They discover an old wheat penny with dirt, dark color, or light staining and immediately reach for metal polish or household cleaners. Within minutes, the original surface disappears forever. Tiny hairline scratches appear. The color changes unnaturally. Under magnification, those signs become obvious almost immediately. Experienced collectors almost always prefer an untouched coin over one that has been cleaned. Even if the cleaned coin looks brighter, much of its original character has been lost forever. That is why one rule continues to be repeated throughout the coin collecting community. Never clean your old pennies. Now look even closer at Lincoln's portrait. Collectors carefully examine the hair above his forehead, the outline of his cheek, the bow tie, and the shoulder. These are among the highest parts of the design and wear down first during circulation. Honest wear is completely expected on a circulated 1948 wheat penny. What matters is how much detail still survives. The lettering also deserves close attention. If "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date remain bold and easy to read, the coin generally has stronger eye appeal than another example with faded lettering. Small differences like these often separate one circulated coin from another. Turning back to the reverse, collectors inspect the wheat ears under magnification. They compare how many individual wheat lines remain visible. They examine the lettering inside 1 cent and United States of America. Even small improvements in strike quality or preservation can make a coin stand out from thousands of ordinary examples. Another fascinating part of collecting the 1948 Philadelphia cent involves searching for unusual varieties. Most coins are completely normal, but specialists always examine every date carefully for die cracks, die chips, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, lamination errors, or repunched mint characteristics found on other years. Although dramatic errors are uncommon, the possibility keeps collectors inspecting every coin instead of assuming it has nothing special to offer. Condition remains one of the biggest factors affecting collector demand. Millions of 1948 pennies were produced, but far fewer survive today with attractive original surfaces. Over the decades, many were cleaned, bent, scratched, polished, or damaged beyond recognition. Every coin removed from collector quality makes original survivors a little more desirable. That is why experienced collectors don't judge a coin by the date alone. They study the complete picture: original color, remaining detail, surface quality, eye appeal, signs of cleaning, environmental exposure. Every piece of evidence helps tell the coin's story. Now comes the question everyone eventually asks. Could a 1948 wheat penny really be worth serious money? The answer depends entirely on the individual coin. Most heavily circulated examples with ordinary wear bring modest collector interest. However, exceptional pieces are a completely different story. High-grade coins showing beautiful original red color have sold for thousands of dollars at major auctions. And if a truly remarkable example combines outstanding preservation with a rare authenticated mint error or an exceptional variety, auction prices can climb dramatically. In extraordinary situations, elite Lincoln wheat pennies have reached values exceeding $325,000, reminding collectors that rarity, condition, and originality together create remarkable opportunities. Of course, that does not mean every 1948 penny is worth that amount. It simply shows why knowledgeable collectors refuse to ignore old coins before examining them carefully. Professional grading also plays an important role. If you discover a 1948 wheat penny that appears unusually well preserved or shows an unusual mint-made feature, certification through respected grading services such as PCGS or NGC can confirm authenticity, assign an official grade, and protect the coin inside a sealed holder. Buyers feel much more confident when a coin has been professionally authenticated. Perhaps the biggest lesson this coin teaches has nothing to do with money. It teaches patience. The people who make exciting discoveries are usually not the luckiest people. They are the ones who slow down, study every detail, compare examples, and resist the urge to clean or dismiss an old coin simply because it looks dirty. So the next time you empty a coin jar, sort through a family collection, or receive change from a cashier, don't overlook an old 1948 wheat penny with no mint mark. Look carefully at the color. Examine the lettering. Study the wheat ears. Notice whether the surfaces appear original. A worn coin may not look impressive at first, but history has a way of hiding in the places most people never think to look. And don't go anywhere, because the next coin changes the story completely. At first glance, it appears to be in much worse condition than this one, with heavy corrosion, deep staining, and years of environmental damage. Most people would throw it aside without another thought. But the 1944 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark has secrets that continue to fascinate collectors, and one rare version has sold for an amount that still shocks the coin collecting world. Most people would never stop to examine a worn-out 1944 Lincoln wheat penny that looks dark, stained, and heavily damaged by the environment. It might be sitting at the bottom of an old coffee can, mixed with ordinary pocket change, or forgotten inside a family coin collection. At first glance, it seems like nothing more than another old penny that has reached the end of its life. The surface is rough. The color is uneven. Deep brown stains cover much of the coin, and years of moisture have left signs of corrosion that make many people believe it belongs in the trash. But experienced collectors see something very different. They know that even a badly worn coin deserves a careful inspection before anyone decides it has no value. The story behind a 1944 Lincoln wheat penny is much bigger than the dirt or damage covering its surface. Sometimes one small detail can completely change the way collectors look at a coin, and that single detail has turned certain 1944 pennies into some of the most famous coins in American history. To understand why this coin continues to attract attention, we have to return to one of the most important years in American history. It was 1944, and World War II was still being fought across Europe and the Pacific. American factories were working day and night to produce equipment for soldiers overseas. Millions of families had loved ones serving in the military, while people at home did everything they could to support the war effort. Every piece of metal was valuable, and the United States Mint had already changed the composition of the 1-cent coin the year before by producing the famous 1943 steel cent. That temporary change saved copper for military equipment, ammunition, and communications. However, by 1944, the Mint returned to making pennies from copper-based metal again, using recycled brass that included spent shell casings from military training. Because of that remarkable connection, every genuine 1944 wheat penny carries a direct link to one of the most important periods in American history. Imagine this very coin leaving the Philadelphia Mint in 1944. It looked bright, clean, and almost golden when it was first struck. Workers packed thousands of fresh pennies into bags before they were shipped to banks across the country. Soon the coin began its journey through grocery stores, restaurants, train stations, movie theaters, post offices, and neighborhood shops. It passed through countless hands as America continued fighting the war and later celebrated victory. Children may have used it to buy candy, while workers dropped it into vending machines or carried it loose inside their pockets. Every scratch, every stain, and every mark visible today tells part of that journey. The heavy environmental damage now covering the coin did not appear overnight. It took decades of circulation, storage, moisture, and exposure to create the rough appearance we see today. When you hold a 1944 Lincoln wheat penny in your hand, begin by looking carefully at the front of the coin. Abraham Lincoln's portrait remains the center of attention even on heavily circulated examples. Across the top appears the familiar national motto, "In God We Trust." To the left is the word liberty, while the date 1944 sits on the right side. One of the first things experienced collectors notice is the empty space beneath the date. On this particular coin, there is no mint mark, which tells us it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Many beginners mistakenly believe a missing mint mark means something is wrong, but that is exactly how Philadelphia cents from this period were made. Knowing that simple fact prevents many collectors from making costly mistakes when identifying older wheat pennies. Now turn the coin over to the reverse side. Even after years of wear, the famous wheat ears still frame the design that collectors have admired for generations. Across the top is E pluribus unum. The words 1 cent remain in the center, with United States of America below. On a heavily circulated example like this one, the fine lines inside the wheat stalks may be worn almost smooth. That is completely normal after decades of everyday use. Experienced collectors never expect perfect detail on a coin that has spent so much time changing hands. Instead, they study what remains. They compare the strength of the lettering, the outline of the wheat ears, and the overall eye appeal before deciding how desirable the coin might be. One feature immediately stands out on this example. The heavy corrosion and dark staining cover much of the surface. Many people see those marks and instantly think the coin has no collector value. That reaction is understandable, but it is also one of the biggest mistakes beginners make. Environmental damage can certainly reduce collector appeal, especially when corrosion is active and continues eating into the metal. However, not every dark area means the coin is worthless. Some stains developed naturally over many decades as copper reacted with moisture, dirt, wood, leather, or other storage materials. Collectors take time to decide whether the surface still appears original or whether someone has cleaned or altered it in the past. That careful examination often reveals much more than a quick glance ever could. One rule remains almost unchanged throughout the coin collecting world. Never clean an old wheat penny. It may seem tempting to remove dirt or corrosion with household cleaners, baking soda, vinegar, metal polish, or even a toothbrush, but doing so usually causes permanent damage. Cleaning strips away the coin's original surface and often leaves tiny scratches that experienced collectors can recognize immediately. Even if the coin appears brighter afterward, it usually loses much of the originality collector's value. A naturally aged coin with honest wear is generally more desirable than one that has been polished until it looks unnaturally shiny. If the coin has active green corrosion or heavy contamination, the safest choice is to leave it alone and ask an experienced coin professional before attempting any treatment. As collectors continue examining the 1944 Philadelphia cent, another question always comes to mind. Could this ordinary-looking coin actually be one of the famous rarities everyone talks about? That question exists because of one of the greatest mint mistakes in American coin history. Although nearly every 1944 Philadelphia cent was struck on a normal copper alloy planchet, a tiny number were accidentally struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943. Those rare 1944 steel cents are among the most valuable Lincoln cents ever discovered. A genuine, authenticated example has sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, with some remarkable pieces realizing prices well above $408,000 at major auctions. That incredible possibility explains why collectors continue checking every 1944 wheat penny, even those found in ordinary pocket change. Of course, finding one of those legendary steel eras is extremely unlikely. Most 1944 cents are the normal copper alloy version, just like the coin we're examining today. Still, experienced collectors know that remarkable discoveries happen only because someone took the time to look carefully instead of making assumptions. That spirit of curiosity has always been at the heart of coin collecting. As this coin continued its journey through the decades, every owner left behind another chapter in its history. Some carried it loose with keys and pocket knives, adding fresh scratches to the surface. Others dropped it into jars where moisture slowly changed the copper. A few pennies spent years inside damp basements, garages, or old toolboxes, allowing corrosion to spread across the metal. That is why no two heavily circulated 1944 Lincoln wheat pennies look exactly alike. Each one has aged in its own way, creating a unique appearance that reflects where it has been and how it was stored. For collectors, these differences make every coin an individual piece of history rather than just another 1-cent coin. One of the first questions collectors ask after identifying the date and mint mark is, how much of the original design has survived? Even if corrosion covers parts of the surface, the remaining details still matter. They carefully study Lincoln's cheek, jawline, hair, and coat. They inspect the lettering around the rim and check whether the date remains strong and easy to read. Turning the coin over, they examine the wheat ears, looking for any remaining grain lines inside the stalks. Stronger details often suggest the coin experienced less wear before environmental damage occurred. That combination can make one circulated example more desirable than another, even when both appear equally old at first glance. Another important step is checking the coin's weight and composition whenever something unusual is suspected. A normal 1944 Philadelphia wheat penny should weigh about 3.11 grams because it was struck on a copper alloy planchet. If a 1944 penny is attracted to a magnet, collectors immediately become interested because that could suggest the extremely rare steel cent era. However, magnets alone do not prove authenticity. Altered coins, plated coins, and counterfeit examples also exist. That is why experienced collectors never rely on one simple test before reaching conclusions. They compare the weight, the color, the edge, and other physical characteristics before considering professional authentication. Besides the famous steel cent, collectors also watch for other mint errors. Off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, die chips, broad strikes, and dramatic lamination errors can all increase collector interest when they are genuine. Some errors are easy to notice because part of the design is missing or shifted. Others require magnification and careful comparison with normal coins. While these varieties are much less famous than the steel cent, authenticated examples still attract strong interest from specialists who enjoy collecting unusual mint mistakes. Every old wheat penny deserves a close inspection because surprising discoveries continue to appear even today. This is one reason experienced collectors never rush through a pile of old pennies. They understand that the biggest mistake is assuming every worn coin is identical. Two 1944 Philadelphia cents may have circulated for decades, yet one could simply be a common circulated coin, while the other might display a valuable mint era or an unusual die variety. Patience often rewards the collector who takes a few extra moments to study every detail, instead of judging a coin by appearance alone. Many beginners also ask whether heavy corrosion automatically means a coin has no value. The answer depends on several factors. Severe environmental damage generally reduces collector demand because originality and eye appeal are important in the hobby. However, history still matters. Some collectors enjoy owning well-worn examples simply because they represent an important year during World War II. Others use circulated coins as affordable placeholders while building complete wheat penny collections. Even when a coin has modest market value, it can still hold educational, historical, or sentimental importance that cannot be measured by price alone. When discussing value, it is important to separate ordinary circulated coins from exceptional rarities. Most heavily circulated 1944 Philadelphia wheat pennies with severe corrosion are not worth extraordinary amounts simply because of their date. The coins that achieve remarkable auction prices are almost always those with authenticated rare errors, outstanding preservation, or unique characteristics verified by professional grading services. For example, an authentic 1944 steel cent confirmed by experts has sold for more than $408,000, making it one of the greatest treasures in Lincoln cent collecting. That astonishing price explains why collectors still inspect every 1944 penny they find, hoping to uncover something extraordinary. If you ever believe your coin may be unusual, avoid making quick decisions. Do not clean it, do not polish it, do not try to improve its appearance before showing it to an expert. Instead, place the coin inside a non-PVC holder or protective flip and handle it only by the edges. Fingerprints, moisture, and improper storage can cause additional damage over time. Simple care today can help preserve whatever originality the coin still possesses. Many people eventually wonder where they should sell an old wheat penny if they think it might be valuable. The safest first step is to identify the coin correctly. Compare it with trusted reference books, official online resources, or recognized price guides. If it appears to have a significant error or unusually strong collector appeal, professional grading through respected companies such as PCGS or NGC can provide authentication and an official condition grade. Once the coin has been properly identified, owners have several selling options. Local coin dealers offer convenience. Coin shows provide opportunities to speak directly with experienced collectors. Major auction houses can be suitable for exceptional rarities, and reputable online marketplaces often connect sellers with buyers around the country. Choosing the right method depends on the coin's rarity, condition, and collector demand. Perhaps the greatest lesson this 1944 Philadelphia wheat penny teaches is that appearances rarely tell the whole story. A dark, rough, and heavily damaged coin may never become a record-breaking rarity, but it still represents a remarkable chapter of American history. It survived wartime America, decades of everyday commerce, changing generations, and years of storage before finally reaching your hands. That journey alone makes it worthy of careful examination. As we finish looking at this fascinating coin, remember one simple habit practiced by experienced collectors everywhere. Slow down before spending any old penny. Read the date carefully. Look beneath the date for the mint mark. Examine both sides under good lighting. Check for unusual weight, unusual color, or striking errors. Preserve the original surface exactly as it is, and never assume that dirt, tunning, or wear tells the complete story. Because the next coin on our countdown proves that even darker surfaces, heavier oxidation, and a completely different metal composition can create one of the most fascinating stories in American coin collecting. At first glance, it almost looks damaged beyond repair. But hidden beneath that weathered appearance is a history that still captures the attention of collectors around the world. The next coin has a completely different story, and at first glance, many people walk right past it. Unlike an old copper penny with a dark brown color, this one looks gray, dull, and covered with heavy oxidation. Some examples even show rusty patches that make people believe the coin has been ruined forever. But the truth is far more interesting. This is the 1943 D-Steel War penny, and it exists because the United States faced one of the greatest challenges in its history. During World War II, copper was desperately needed for military equipment, electrical wiring, ammunition, and communications. Instead of using the usual bronze alloy, the United States Mint made a bold decision that changed the appearance of the Lincoln cent for one unforgettable year. Millions of Americans suddenly found a silver-colored penny in their pocket, and many thought it looked strange. Today, that unusual decision has made the 1943 steel cent one of the most recognized coins ever produced. Our story begins in 1943. Across the world, the war was reaching a critical stage. American factories worked around the clock, building tanks, aircraft, ships, and military vehicles. Every pound of copper mattered. To help conserve that metal, the United States Mint struck pennies using low-carbon steel coated with a thin layer of zinc. It was the first and only regular Lincoln cent made primarily from steel. The Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark beneath the date, produced hundreds of millions of these wartime coins. Although the mintage was large, their unusual composition and fascinating history continue to capture the attention of collectors today. Imagine receiving this coin in your change during 1943. Instead of the familiar brown penny, you would see a bright silver-colored coin reflecting light in a completely different way. Many Americans were surprised. Some even confused it with a dime because of its color. Others disliked the new appearance because the zinc coating quickly wore away in circulation. Once the protective coating became thin, the steel underneath was exposed to moisture, humidity, and oxygen. Over many decades, that exposure created dark gray surfaces, reddish-brown rust, and heavy oxidation on countless surviving examples. That is exactly what we see on this heavily circulated coin today. Begin by looking closely at the front of the coin. Abraham Lincoln's portrait remains in the center, just as it had since 1909. Across the top appears the familiar motto, "In God We Trust." To Lincoln's left is the word liberty, while the date 1943 appears on the right. Beneath the date is one small detail that immediately interests experienced collectors. The tiny D mint mark tells us this coin was struck at the Denver Mint. That single letter is one of the first things collectors verify because it identifies where the coin was made. Although Denver struck millions of steel cents, the mint mark still plays an important role when identifying different varieties and comparing collector demand. Now turn the coin over. The famous wheat reverse remains unchanged even though the metal itself is completely different. Two wheat stalks frame the design, surrounding the words 1 cent. Above them appears E pluribus unum, while United States of America fills the lower part of the reverse. Even on heavily circulated examples, collectors study these details carefully. They examine the lettering, the wheat lines, and the rim to understand how well the coin survived decades of circulation. Every remaining detail helps reveal the coin's journey through American history. Unlike copper, steel reacts very differently to the environment. This explains why many 1943 steel pennies develop rough surfaces that can easily be mistaken for severe damage. Moisture is the greatest enemy of these coins. Once the zinc coating wears away, the exposed steel begins to oxidize. Tiny reddish-brown rust spots slowly spread across the surface, sometimes becoming larger patches after many years. Collectors understand that this natural process is common on circulated steel cents. However, they also know that heavy rust can reduce collector appeal because it permanently affects the metal beneath the original coating. That brings us to one of the biggest mistakes new collectors make. Some people discover a rusty steel penny and immediately try to polish it until it shines again. Others soak it in vinegar, scrub it with steel wool, or use commercial rust removers. Unfortunately, those treatments almost always make the situation worse. Cleaning removes whatever remains of the original zinc surface and leaves fresh scratches that experts can identify almost immediately. Once the original finish disappears, it can never be replaced. Even a worn steel penny with honest agging is generally preferred over one that has been aggressively cleaned. As collectors continue examining the coin, they often reach for a small magnet. This simple test works because genuine 1943 steel pennies are magnetic. Copper wheat pennies are not. The magnetic attraction immediately confirms that the coin is made from steel rather than bronze. While this test is useful, experienced collectors never stop there. Counterfeits and altered coins exist, especially because one of the rarest Lincoln cents in history involves the year 1943. That incredible rarity is the famous 1943 D bronze wheat penny. During production, a tiny number of leftover bronze planchets from 1942 were accidentally struck using 1943 dies. Instead of producing the normal steel cent, the mint created an extremely small number of bronze 1943 pennies. Genuine, authenticated examples are among the greatest treasures in American numismatics. Some have sold for more than $840,000 at public auction, making them legendary discoveries. This astonishing value explains why collectors inspect every 1943 penny with extraordinary care. The overwhelming majority are ordinary steel cents, but hope continues to inspire careful examination because remarkable discoveries have happened before. Of course, finding one of those famous bronze eras is incredibly unlikely. Still, experienced collectors understand that knowledge creates opportunity. Every old coin deserves a careful inspection before anyone decides it is ordinary. Sometimes the smallest detail, a different weight, an unusual color, or the absence of magnetic attraction can completely change a coin's story. And as we continue exploring this remarkable 1943 D steel war penny, an even bigger question begins to emerge. How do collectors separate a heavily worn wartime survivor from one that deserves serious attention? The answer involves much more than the date alone. It depends on condition, originality, preservation, and several small details that many people never think to check. As the inspection continues, experienced collectors begin looking beyond the obvious signs of wear. They understand that every 1943 D steel war penny tells its own story, and no two surviving coins have aged in exactly the same way. Some spent years inside dry coin albums where they remained protected from moisture, preserving much of their original zinc coating. Others circulated through thousands of daily transactions before being forgotten in garages, sheds, or damp basements. Those environments made a tremendous difference. The coin we are examining today shows heavy oxidation and environmental damage, yet that doesn't stop collectors from studying every remaining detail. Instead, it encourages them to ask an important question: how much of the coin's original character has survived beneath the years of use? One area that always receives careful attention is the edge of the coin. Because steel reacts differently than copper, rust often begins where the protective zinc coating has worn away. Under magnification, collectors check whether the oxidation is light and stable or whether deep corrosion has begun eating into the metal itself. Stable agging is generally easier to preserve, while active corrosion may continue spreading if the coin is stored in humid conditions. This is one reason knowledgeable collectors always keep steel cents in a cool, dry place. Moisture is the biggest enemy of these wartime coins, and proper storage can help prevent further deterioration. The surface itself can reveal even more clues. A naturally circulated steel cent often displays soft gray tones mixed with darker areas where the zinc coating has thinned over time. On heavily worn examples, reddish-brown rust may appear around the lettering, the rim, or Lincoln's portrait. While these marks reduce eye appeal compared with a brilliant uncirculated example, they also remind us that this coin actually served its purpose during one of the most important periods in American history. Every scratch and every worn detail reflects decades of real circulation rather than sitting untouched inside a collector's album. Collectors also examine the quality of the strike. Even though this coin has experienced heavy wear, certain features should still remain visible. They study Lincoln's profile, the shape of his jaw, the outline of his coat, and the clarity of the words "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date. On the reverse, attention shifts to the wheat ears and the lettering around 1 cent and United States of America. Strong remaining details can sometimes make a circulated coin more attractive than another example with similar wear, but weaker original striking quality. These subtle differences may seem unimportant to beginners, but they often influence collector interest. Another fascinating part of the story involves wartime production itself. The steel cent solved one problem by saving copper, but it created several new ones. Many people complained that the coins rusted easily, became stained after circulation, and were difficult to distinguish from dimes. Banks and businesses also reported that vending machines sometimes rejected them. Because of these practical problems, the United States Mint abandoned steel cents after only 1 year and returned to a copper-based alloy in 1944. That short production period is exactly what makes the 1943 steel penny so memorable today. It represents a unique experiment that will never be repeated in regular Lincoln cent production. As collectors become more experienced, they begin searching for mint errors beyond the famous bronze cent. Die cracks, repunched mint marks, clipped planchets, off-center strikes, broad strikes, and dramatic die breaks can all increase collector interest when authenticated. Most of these errors are uncommon, and some are quite dramatic. A large off-center strike, for example, leaves part of the design missing while keeping the date visible. Coins with striking mint errors often attract collectors because they combine historical importance with unusual production mistakes. Every genuine error tells another chapter of the mint's wartime manufacturing story. Condition also plays a much larger role than many people realize. A heavily oxidized steel cent like this one carries historical value, but collectors generally pay the strongest prices for examples that retain smooth surfaces, minimal rust, and original zinc coating. Coins that avoided moisture for decades naturally stand out in the marketplace. This is why professional grading services spend so much time examining originality, surface preservation, and overall eye appeal before assigning an official grade. Authentication provides confidence that both the coin and its condition have been evaluated according to recognized standards. Whenever people hear stories about valuable 1943 pennies, excitement usually follows. That excitement is understandable, but it is important to separate genuine rarities from ordinary circulated examples. The overwhelming majority of 1943 D steel pennies are exactly what they appear to be, wartime steel cents that circulated through everyday commerce. However, exceptional mint-state examples with outstanding preservation can sell for impressive amounts, while authenticated major errors, and especially the legendary 1943 D bronze cent, reach an entirely different level. One authenticated 1943 D bronze cent has realized more than $840,000, making it one of the greatest treasures in American coin collecting. That remarkable result is tied to extraordinary rarity, not simply the date itself. If you discover a 1943 D steel penny at home, the smartest approach is patience. Hold the coin only by its edges and avoid touching the surfaces with your fingers. Never attempt to polish away rust or brighten the metal. Household cleaners, abrasive cloths, wire brushes, and chemical treatments almost always cause permanent damage. Even if the coin looks cleaner afterward, collectors can quickly recognize altered surfaces. Preserving originality is almost always better than trying to improve appearance. Many viewers also ask the same practical question. If I believe my coin is special, where should I sell it? The answer depends on what you have. Start by identifying the coin carefully. Confirm that the date, mint mark, and metal composition are correct. If the coin appears unusual, for example, if a 1943 penny is not magnetic or displays an obvious mint error, it may be worth submitting it to a respected grading service such as PCGS or NGC. Professional authentication helps establish trust and makes it easier to compare your coin with others in the market. After that, you can consider selling through a reputable coin dealer, a major auction house, a coin show, or a trusted online marketplace where knowledgeable collectors are actively searching for interesting pieces. Perhaps the most valuable lesson from the 1943 D steel war penny has nothing to do with money. It reminds us that history often survives in the smallest objects. During a time when the world was facing enormous challenges, even the humble 1-cent coin changed to support the war effort. That decision created a coin unlike any other in the Lincoln cent series. Today, whether it is bright and well-preserved or dark with heavy oxidation, every genuine steel cent represents a small piece of that remarkable story. So before you overlook another gray penny that seems rusty or worn beyond repair, take a closer look. Check the date. Find the small d beneath the year. Test whether it is magnetic, but never rely on that test alone. Protect the coin from moisture, avoid cleaning it, and compare it with reliable references if something seems unusual. A careful inspection may not reveal a legendary bronze rarity every time, but it will help you understand the difference between an ordinary coin and a genuine piece of American wartime history. And don't leave just yet, because the final coin in this countdown takes us back to the early years of the Lincoln Wheat Penny series. Its dark woodgrain tunning, severe environmental wear, and surprising collector appeal have caused countless people to overlook a coin that deserves far more attention than it usually receives. Sometimes the oldest-looking penny on the table has the most fascinating story of them all. As we reach the final coin in today's countdown, this is the moment many collectors wait for. It doesn't shine like a freshly minted coin. It doesn't have brilliant red copper color or flawless surfaces. In fact, many people would probably ignore it without giving it a second look. The surface is almost black. Deep woodgrain tunning stretches across both sides, while years of environmental exposure have left scars that seem to hide the original beauty of the design. To an untrained eye, it looks like nothing more than an old penny that has lived a hard life. But sometimes, the most overlooked coins carry the greatest stories, and this 1940 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark proves that lesson better than almost any other coin in the wheat cent series. To understand why this penny continues to fascinate collectors, we have to travel back more than 8 decades. The year was 1940. The United States was slowly recovering from the Great Depression, while across Europe, the Second World War had already begun. Although America had not yet officially entered the conflict, factories were increasing production, transportation networks were expanding, and millions of people relied on small change every single day. Pennies moved constantly from one hand to another. They paid for newspapers before work, candy after school, bus fares, and simple everyday purchases that now exist only in history books. Among those millions of coins leaving the Philadelphia Mint was this humble Lincoln wheat penny, never knowing it would still exist long after the people who first spent it were gone. Imagine holding this exact coin on the morning it entered circulation. Its copper surface glowed with bright color, every letter stood sharp, and Lincoln's portrait looked almost sculpted. It was simply another 1-cent coin among millions. Nobody saved it because nobody expected it to become part of history. Instead, it traveled through shops, diners, railroad stations, grocery stores, and family businesses. It crossed generations, survived changing economies, and witnessed events that transformed America forever. Every scratch, every dark streak, and every worn detail tells part of that remarkable journey. Now look carefully at the front of the coin. Abraham Lincoln's portrait still dominates the design even after decades of circulation. Across the top are the familiar words, "In God we trust." To the left appears liberty, while the date 1940 rests on the right. Experienced collectors immediately examine one tiny detail beneath the date. There is no mint mark. That is completely correct for coins struck at the Philadelphia Mint during this period. Beginners sometimes mistake the missing mint mark for an error, but seasoned collectors know that this empty space simply identifies where the coin was produced. Before looking at anything else, they always confirm this important detail. Turning the coin over reveals the classic wheat reverse that has become one of the most beloved designs in American numismatic history. Two graceful wheat stalks frame the center of the coin, representing the nation's agricultural strength. E pluribus unum stretches across the top, while 1 cent stands proudly in the middle above United States of America. Even on heavily circulated examples, collectors study these features with remarkable patience. They compare the lettering, examine the wheat lines, inspect the rim, and search for anything unusual that separates one survivor from another. But what makes this particular coin different is not the date alone. It is the appearance. The deep black color mixed with dramatic woodgrain toning often causes people to dismiss the coin immediately. Some assume it has been burned. Others believe the dark surface means it is damaged beyond repair. In reality, the story is far more complicated. Woodgrain toning develops when tiny differences in the copper alloy react differently to decades of oxidation. Instead of agging evenly, the metal forms dark streaks that resemble the grain of old wood. On certain wheat pennies, this effect becomes surprisingly dramatic, creating an appearance unlike almost any other circulating coin. Collectors often stop for several minutes when they find strong natural woodgrain toning because every pattern is completely unique. No machine deliberately created these lines. Nature did. Decades of chemical changes inside the metal slowly transformed an ordinary penny into something visually unforgettable. That originality is impossible to duplicate perfectly, which is why naturally toned coins continue attracting collectors who appreciate character more than perfect surfaces. Unfortunately, environmental damage can also become part of the story. Years spent inside damp jars, wooden boxes, leather wallets, or humid basements sometimes leave behind stains, rough patches, or dark corrosion. The challenge for collectors is learning the difference between stable natural agging and active environmental damage. This is where experience becomes valuable. Instead of judging a coin by color alone, they examine whether the surface remains original, whether corrosion is still active, and whether important design details have survived. One mistake continues to destroy thousands of old wheat pennies every year. Someone discovers a dark coin and decides to make it look new again. Metal polish, baking soda, vinegar, lemon juice, toothpaste, and abrasive cloths are all commonly used by people who simply don't know any better. Within minutes, decades of original surface disappear forever. Fine scratches replace natural agging, the color becomes unnatural, and much of the collector appeal vanishes. Professional numismatists can usually recognize cleaned coins almost instantly. That is why one rule remains almost universal throughout the hobby: never clean an old Lincoln wheat penny. As the investigation continues, collectors begin asking a much more important question. Could this ordinary-looking 1940 Philadelphia cent be hiding something unusual? That single question has inspired generations of collectors to examine every old wheat penny they encounter. The answer is not always obvious. Sometimes the clues are hidden inside the lettering. Sometimes they appear in the strike itself. Other times, they involve tiny die cracks, repunched features, or unusual minting mistakes that most people would never notice without magnification. And that is exactly why this coin deserves far more attention than its dark appearance suggests. Under careful lighting, experienced collectors rotate the coin slowly, searching for every tiny detail the mint accidentally left behind over 80 years ago. Because occasionally, the biggest discovery begins with the smallest observation. At this point, excitement starts building. The date alone is interesting. The natural woodgrain tunning makes the coin even more unusual. But there is still one part of the story we have not discussed yet. It is the reason serious collectors never rush past a 1940 wheat penny, no matter how dark or worn it appears. Hidden within this date are several collectible varieties and one remarkable possibility that has caused experienced numismatists to inspect thousands of ordinary-looking pennies, hoping to find the one example everyone else overlooked. And that is where this story becomes truly unforgettable. And this is where the story reaches its most surprising point. After learning about the history, the design, the condition, and the importance of preserving a 1940 Lincoln wheat penny, there is still one question almost everyone asks. How much could one actually be worth? The answer depends on details that many people never notice. A heavily circulated 1940 Philadelphia wheat penny with black woodgrain tunning and severe environmental damage usually has only modest collector value because the damage greatly affects its condition. However, experienced collectors know they should never judge a coin by appearance alone. Before deciding its value, they first check whether the coin has an important mint error, an unusual die variety, or an exceptionally rare feature hidden beneath decades of circulation. For example, some collectors carefully examine every 1940 wheat penny looking for repunched mint marks on Denver or San Francisco issues, doubled dies, die cracks, cuds, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, or other genuine mint-made errors. These are the discoveries that can completely change the value of a coin. Imagine finding an old black penny in a coffee can that everyone else ignored. It looks dirty. It feels rough. The surface is almost completely dark. Then, under magnification, you notice strong doubling on the lettering or a dramatic mint error. Suddenly, the coin everyone thought was worthless becomes the most exciting piece in the collection. That is why experienced collectors never rush. They inspect every letter, every number, every edge, every tiny mark. Because one small detail can separate an ordinary survivor from an extraordinary discovery. When authentic rare mint errors appear on 1940 Lincoln wheat pennies, auction prices can become astonishing. Certified examples with major doubled dies, dramatic off-center strikes, or other significant mint errors have reached values well above $325,000, while exceptionally rare combinations of outstanding preservation and major minting mistakes have attracted even stronger bidding from advanced collectors. Those headline prices are extremely uncommon and apply only to genuinely rare, authenticated coins, not ordinary circulated examples. Professional authentication becomes extremely important at this stage. If you believe your coin has an unusual feature, resist the temptation to guess its value based on internet headlines. Instead, compare it with reliable references and consider having it examined by respected grading companies such as PCGS or NGC. Independent grading confirms authenticity, identifies important varieties, and gives buyers confidence if the coin is ever sold. Another lesson many beginners learn too late involves cleaning. Some people think a dark coin will become more valuable if it shines like new. Unfortunately, the opposite often happens. Cleaning removes original surfaces, creates fine scratches, changes the natural color, and makes it much easier for experts to recognize that the coin has been altered. Even a heavily circulated coin usually has greater collector appeal when its original surface remains untouched. If you ever decide to sell a wheat penny, avoid rushing into the first offer you receive. Begin by identifying the exact date and mint mark. Study the coin carefully under bright lighting and magnification. Compare it with trusted auction records and price guides. If the coin appears unusual, seek opinions from reputable coin dealers or submit it for professional grading before listing it for sale. Knowledge almost always leads to better decisions than excitement alone. Storage matters just as much. Hold the coin only by its edges, keep it in a non-PVC flip or protective holder, and store it in a cool, dry place away from moisture. Good storage will not repair existing damage, but it can prevent additional deterioration and help preserve whatever originality remains. Perhaps the greatest lesson from this 1940 Lincoln wheat penny has very little to do with money. It teaches patience. It teaches observation. And it reminds us that history often survives in the smallest objects. This coin may have traveled through the final years before America's entry into World War II. It may have passed through grocery stores, train stations, neighborhood markets, and countless hands before ending up forgotten inside a drawer or an old family collection. Every scratch and every dark patch became part of that journey. Most people would never stop to examine a worn black penny. Collectors do, because they understand that remarkable discoveries rarely announce themselves. They hide in plain sight, waiting for someone who knows where to look. So the next time an old wheat penny appears in your change, don't dismiss it because it looks dirty or heavily worn. Read the date carefully. Look beneath the year for the mint mark. Examine both sides under good lighting. Search for unusual errors. Preserve the original surface, and never clean the coin before you know exactly what you have. One ordinary-looking cent could become the most memorable discovery in your collection, and sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones everyone else almost throws away. That brings us to the end of today's countdown. If this video changed the way you look at old Lincoln wheat pennies, make sure you keep checking every coin that passes through your hands. The next remarkable discovery may not come from an auction or a museum. It could already be sitting inside your pocket, an old coin jar, or a forgotten family collection, quietly waiting for someone curious enough to notice it. Until next time, happy collecting, and may your next penny be the one every collector hopes to find.